fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
Hey guys, good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the American Hotspur here on Stateside Footy. Usually this thing goes down on Saturday morning, but you know, that's what it's all about, man. Sometimes we have to adjust, sometimes we have to do what we got to do. And so today, Friday afternoon at 2 p.m., I hope all you Spurs fans here in the United States are enjoying the afternoon. For all my homies in the UK, man, I hope you've enjoyed your day and I hope you're settling to your evening. All right, man. Joining us this week, he's a very talented analyst from Spotlight On Spurs. And, of course, last week we were on Spurs TTID. And, of course, you see him everywhere on the web. Because, again, man, he's just awesome, man. Luke Samuels, how you doing today, man?
Appreciate it. Very, very nice intro.
Yeah.
Intro. Too kind, sir. Too kind. But I'm doing well. How you doing?
I cannot complain, man. It's just it's actually a beautiful afternoon here. And, in the great state of Michigan. So, you know, I cannot complain. You know, it's been a weird summer, but what can I say? All right. So before we get into it, I just want to let everybody know to hit the like and subscribe buttons because we are on a race to 1,000 subs. And the quicker that we can get to that mark, the quicker that we can do really cool shit on this channel, especially with the live streams, but also for the American Hotspur as well too. Fan shows, you know, membership shows, all that good stuff. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. All right, Luke, I got to tell you something though, really quick, right? We have a saying here in the United States, and that goes, let's not talk about the labor, just show us the baby. All right. And in the spirit of that, we got some news and notes. And we're going to start off with the news yesterday. And it revolves around this gentleman right here, João Palhinha. And allegedly, the Spurs have signed the center defensive mid on a one-year loan from Bayern Munich. The deal does contain an option to buy the 30-year-old defensive midfielder for £27 million. But that being said, the number 6 that the Spurs fans have been claiming, you know, have been literally jumping out of the roof to get through the door for well over a year now. They get one through the door. There's a few things that I want to talk about João Palhinha. And of course, last week, if you guys were tuning into Spurs Diehards TTID, I think you said that last week you would have preferred Douglas Luiz a little bit more, not necessarily in the defensive side of the field, because I think both are equally absolutely phenomenal defensively. But, you know, Luiz gives this team a little bit more moving forward. But that being said, if we got one or the other, you would be satisfied. When I look at this deal, the first question that comes to mind is, you know, what does this mean for a guy like Yves Bissouma, who, whether you want to admit it or not, he's had himself a very good preseason. I think he's actually played his way onto this first team. So there's that. But the other thing is, what is going to be Palhinha's role on this team? Because again, he's 30 years old. I think he played less than 500 minutes last year because of injuries, which is why this deal is a loan and not an outright buy. But also, is this going to be a continuing trend? And to that point, I have to ask you, would it be best to use him potentially like getting the best 30 minutes as you possibly can for him to keep him healthy throughout the course of the season and use them in strategic areas instead of just outright as a starter? Because whether or not we like to admit it, there is questions about his durability moving forward. So at that point, I'm curious to know how you feel about this, because when I look at this move and I take a step back a little bit, I'm wondering whether or not this was more of a depth piece than for him to come in and just challenge for a spot in the starting 11.
Yeah, well, I think the deal itself is something that needs to be highlighted, because if you went and spent £35 million on him, then that's one thing. But if you're signing him on loan with no obligation, he's not your player. So you can, if you didn't utilize him every game, then there wouldn't really be that many conversations. However, if you sign him for 35 million, 40 million for a 30-year-old, then there might be conversations had between a fan base saying, like, what are we doing here, sort of thing. So I think that the deal is key. Last week when I spoke about it, I still stand on them points 100%. However, I didn't expect it to be a loan deal. I think a loan deal works perfectly almost for all parties other than maybe Bayern. I'm not sure why they sanctioned a loan deal, because 1 year down the line, if we don't take the option, he's just another year older. He's another year down the line, and therefore he's market value probably decreasing unless he comes in and has an unbelievable season at Spurs, which obviously we all hope for. My thing with him is the fact that his partner becomes absolutely crucial. I think, as I said before, I think he's a good player. I think he'll bring a lot of the characteristics that we need that we don't have in this squad. But you're very right in terms of he might actually be a player that normally you bring a player in, and if they don't play too much, they come in against the inferior teams. He might actually become a little bit more of a star in the games where we are going to probably be dominated, or like against your Cities, against your Real Madrids in the Champions League, that sort of thing. Because this is the kind of player that breaks up the play. So you're not going to really need this profile of player against the lower league teams in the Premier League, for say. So it's a weird one how it's going to work. But the rumours is that Frank said that he wanted this player. So if Frank wants it, then I have a lot of faith in Frank from a player profile. So yeah, it'd be really, really interesting to see. But it definitely brings stuff that we don't necessarily have. As you said, personally, I would have preferred someone who's just a little bit better on the ball to be able to start up attacks, especially when you've got the way that we've been setting up in pre-season is almost three centre backs, almost a wing back kind of been
correct
in him. So this means that we've essentially got four players in that defensive third. I wasn't sure whether a destroyer type was needed. Under Ange, he would have been my absolute number one, because he obviously kind of flooded out.
It's ironic.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a little ironic. Yeah, you're right about that.
But yeah, again, I'm not saying it's a bad signing. If these are the type of level of signings that we're making, then that's definitely a positive. And then again, when you go down the whole loan situation, does this now free up a load of money to be spent in other positions, i.e. Morgan Gibbs-White deal didn't get over the line. So have we now got that 60 million to push elsewhere, which let's all be hopeful we can bring in a superstar in that forward line somewhere.
Yeah, and you mentioned that because the financials are key too, because word came out today that Spurs are very interested in paying the entire freight on Xavi Simons. And for those that don't know, Xavi is just an unbelievable, Dutch forward, plays multiple positions. And, it was originally thought that he might end up at Chelsea. But that being said, for a team like Spurs to make those intentions, and I think I might have mentioned to you earlier this week in the chat, that it's not necessarily about what happened with Morgan Gibbs-White, it's how they react to it, because the last thing Spurs need is to lose their own narrative. And revert back to what fans usually say, which is same old Spurs, yada, 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 especially going into something like the Super Cup. And then, of course, at the start of the season, the last thing they need is, the idea of a split fan base. And so I like seeing that. I even heard that they were all in on Rodrigo as well, too. So now, granted, whether or not that was actually legit is besides the point. It's nice to see that they're actually moving with intention, because that's exactly what I've been saying for a year and a half now. It just didn't seem like this team was interested in moving with intention. They had a plan to build around youth, and I don't necessarily think this summer's a pivot, But that being said, it's nice to see that they're trying to surround some of these young kids with far more experience, especially on the eve of a season that has Champions League.
Yeah, completely agree. And you might be right in terms of it may not be a pivot. It might be a case of we've looked at the squad, we've looked at last year and gone, no, actually, this is what's needed. Or is it a pivot in terms of we've got the young players in the door now. They're going to stay young for a long period of time. Your Archie Grays, your Bergvall, they're going to be young for an extended period. Mikey Moore, who I'm sure we'll discuss, he will be coming into the team again, being young. So are we completely coming away from that young project because we've got them all in now already? Or is it just a case, as I said, that we're sitting there going, this is just what we need right now? Like Polina is probably not a 3, 4, 5 year plan. He's probably a 1 or 2 year plan. So it's interesting to see where we go. But I'm liking this Spurs. This is the sort of Spurs that we've needed. We need players that come in and improve the 11. Polina definitely does in my eyes, especially from, as I said, we don't have that sort of player in our squad. And then Kudus, who looks like he's going to be a top player at Spurs as well.
You know, you mentioned before we get to Mikey Moore, you did mention something quite interesting about Polina's ability on the ball, and that makes me think that this is not going to be a situation where he's going to be started, because I think you and I universally agree that as of right now, Rodrigo Betancourt is probably the best option at that position right now, especially when you consider the way that they use him. He's like a hybrid 6'8", kind of a little bit more of a deep line playmaker, can get forward, is extremely talented on the ball. And he's not necessarily all that crappy on defense either. He's actually pretty damn good. And, the way that I look at this is, there's going to be a lot of situations, not just in the league, but Champions League as well, too. There's going to be situations where we're tied 1-1 and maybe there's 10, 15 minutes left. And of course, you're going to bring on a more of a defensive sub in that double pivot that's going to be able to lock down a little bit, lock down the middle of the park. And especially, as we saw yesterday where, our Arsenal was literally not just trying to shoot the ball down the right-hand side, but when they were trying to switch, they were working through the middle of the park. At that point, you have a guy that's going to be able to disrupt passing lanes and be able to, at least initiate a counterattack from that standpoint. So for me, I feel like this is going to be a situation where they're going to strategically use Polina at the right points of the game, especially when we're either trying to hold the lead like we were yesterday, or whether the game's tied, and it's going to give that defensive leadership that this team absolutely needs. And I actually just think him playing in front of Romero and Van de Ven down the stretch is actually going to be far beneficial than say like a guy like Yves Bissouma.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you bring that in, and again, we discussed this just before we went live about the consistency and the availability of players. But if you had a good level of Romero who consistently plays, and you would imagine plays to a decent level, Van de Ven plays consistently. Let's say both of them play 30 to 32 league games this year. If you have them two and Polina in front, then 100% that is a solid little base that you've got there. And then you obviously work some players around it. So I completely agree. I think you're absolutely correct in that. But also, as Spurs fans, we need to really understand that this year is going to be very, very different to what we've seen for the last few years, I would say, purely on the basis that, and I use this analogy on several other streams, but in the same week that we play each other, and actually the Premier League is a real good example of this, we could be playing Burnley at home and then playing Real Madrid away the same week. The midfield that you require for them two games are going to be very, very different. The requirements that are going to be needed, the kind of tactics that we may employ, the way that we want to progress the ball, the way that we want to be probably more aggressive or less aggressive, depending on what tactic you go with, will mean that we need different variety of players. And what I would say is a lot of our midfield options, a lot of people say they're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. Now, you don't want to be going into every single game with a very similar midfield because, as I said, the different games will require different things. So I absolutely think you're absolutely right, and also it could free up our wing backs again to be able to be a little bit more like wing backs in terms of being able to get up the pitch, being able to not necessarily worry as much defensively. Whereas for us, it felt like under Ange, whenever there was an attack, everyone just had to kind of bomb back as much as possible because they were so far up the pitch. So yeah, I think that's something that we really need to get used to. And as I said, first game of the season is Burnley, and then second is Man City. The midfield, the way that we play, the tactics we employ, potentially even the formation we play, is going to be very, very different in these two different games. So I think he's a great option, and again, something that we just do not have in this squad.
What does this mean for Yves Bissouma at this point? Because again, I mentioned this at the top right here, that whether you like to agree with this or not, he has played as well. He has played his way into this first team. I think his preseason actually has been pretty good. It looked like he came to camp focused, and it doesn't look like the things that, the negativity that surrounded him last season even applies. I think something happened toward the end of last season when when Ange put him back on the field. And I think he took advantage of down that stretch in the Europa League that did carry over to the season. But that being said, when you bring in a guy like that essentially is more or less going to take your role, that would probably signal that he's pretty much done. Correct?
Yeah, I think he's the one that goes. I definitely think he's the one that goes. I can't see a world where we go with 6 central midfielders. We start from probably the least favoured at the moment. You probably say Archie Gray. You've got Bergvall. You've obviously got Bissouma. You've got Bentancur. You've got Papsar. Yep. So for me, Bissouma's the one that misses out. And I'm glad you said about the end of the season, because I think that is forgotten about. He had a great end to the season, albeit only a couple of games, but he was very, very good. In terms of ability, he's probably the best midfielder we have in the squad, to be honest with you. When we signed him from Brighton, I was like, hang on a minute here. We've got one of the league's best. Like, he is unbelievable. The problem is he's just not consistent enough. Again, I've said it just now that we just don't have consistency amongst this squad. Too many of the players are 9s out of 10s and then drop to 4 the next week. And you just cannot have that when you're a top level side. That's what we want to be. If you go through your City team, your Liverpool teams, even them lot down the road, they have consistent players. They don't have players that play unbelievable one week and then drop off and play terrible the next. And unfortunately, Bissouma's one of those players. And this isn't just under Ange. This has been previous. He was the same under Conte. If everyone remembers, actually, when Ange brought him back into the fold when he first started, everyone was going, "Oh, look, Conte didn't know how to use this sort of midfielder." He's where, and then obviously we see the drop off from Bissouma. So yeah, technically he's unbelievable. He's such a good player when he's on his day, but his day's not often enough, and Spurs need consistency. So I think Palhinha brings that out, and Bentancur. One of the main reasons, I think they were the two that everyone was kind of saying it's one of them that probably leaves, but Thomas Frank, in his first ever interview as Spurs boss, name checked Bentancur. So that on its own for me says, well, he isn't going anywhere, because most managers won't say, for instance, in the same interview, he didn't mention Sonny's name. So for me, that kind of signifies he's one that's probably going to stick around. And yeah, I would say on a consistent basis, Bentancur's probably the favourite one out of all of them.
Yep. Turning our attention to this young man, and it was reported that Mikey Moore he fished his wish. As Scottish Giants Rangers made the move for the 17-year-old winger. And I like this because, number one, I think the Scottish Premier League is a very good league for him to get minutes in. I like the fact that he's going to a team that has European aspirations, continuously are playing in big time European games outside of the Scottish Premier League, and of course the rivalry with Celtic as well too. I love this move for him. You and I were talking about this last week a little bit, and I've been continuously saying this for I don't know, at least a year now, that if you don't have a role for him, you are doing him such a detriment, because playing in the U21s, you're not going to get that high level minutes that you need in order to develop. And and if you're only playing like maybe once a month, maybe twice every 2 months, you're actually doing him more of a disservice. And I know that Thomas Frank likes him. He shouted him out, before the preseason. I thought he was pretty decent in the preseason as well too. But I think once we got wind that he was not going on this Asian part of the tour, and we got word that he was looking for it, me personally, I just think that he probably had that conversation with Thomas Frank, and Frank just laid it out and said, "Hey, listen, because we have so much depth at your position, we have no idea where you're going to fit, what role you're going to play. And as far as the fact that he still needs to grow. He needs to grow in his body. He needs to put on, a little bit more weight for him to come back next year and be viable as a winger in the Premier League. And so from that standpoint, I think he landed in the right spot. 100%. And I like the fact that he's going there. He's going to be able to challenge for minutes. He's going to be able to test himself at a level that is, quite frankly, like, if we're being honest, this is a level that is maybe a little bit better than Mikey Moore. Everybody understands he's got the talent, but now all of a sudden you have to go to that league and you have to challenge yourself. You have to challenge for starting minutes. And I think he's in the right atmosphere for his developmental curve, and especially if he goes there and lights up the Scottish Premier League, man, he's going to come back just riding an absolute wave.
Yeah, again, I completely agree. I love the fact that this move seems to have been pushed by him, where he's gone, no, I want minutes. No, I don't. I can stay at Spurs, and yeah, let's be completely honest. Let's talk. When you talk about talent, you talk about what this guy could become. But let's talk about his current ability now. And he's not at the required level that Tottenham need. He's not there isn't ever a conversation. We shouldn't be ever in a conversation where we're sitting here going, Mikey Moore should absolutely be starting the next Premier League game, because we've got, as you said, so many options in that space at the moment. So for me, it was always going to be a case of he pick up the odd cup games. He might pick up games where he's coming on the last 10, 15. And some players will benefit from that. But if he's sitting there saying, no, I absolutely want to go out, then that's kudos to him, to be honest with you. I think it's brilliant, the fact that he's done that. And yeah, in terms of the play, in terms of who he's gone to, so anyone that's not really familiar with like the Scottish football, they've obviously just appointed Russell Martin, who was the old Southampton boss.
Yep.
From my understanding, the way that Rangers sort of played wasn't very attractive on the eye. However, they've brought in a manager that's going to change that. Yeah. But some positives for looking at it just from completely subjectively, he's going to be playing in a team that are one of the best in the league. So you are going to assume that most of the teams that he comes up against are going to be in a defensive block to stop Rangers from winning the game. So therefore, a lot of burden is going to be placed on the attacking players to say, you need to break this down. And actually, that's one of the most difficult things to do in football. So I actually think that, I'm not saying this would have happened or he would have gone there, but let's say like a Leeds come in for him and he was going to play the low level of the Championship or the bottom say 5 sides of the Premier League, then it would have been more about his defensive roles and how he's getting around the pitch, and it wouldn't actually be what he's good at. And that's what we need him to hone at. So I think it's a great option to go to Rangers. As you said, people don't realise just how big a club this is. So he will be playing with a hell of a lot of pressure. There'll be expectation to play and win. There'll be expectation to excite. There'll be big games. They play Celtic 4 times. That's if they don't draw him in the cup. As you said, they've got Europe. And as Razzle Dazzle in the chat, big up to him, said, he also spoke to Jermaine Defoe. Jermaine Defoe's played in that league. He's played for that team. And they're fiercely loyal up there. So I think, obviously, he has to play minutes. But if he does end up playing a lot of minutes, then it could end up being a very, very good move.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I totally forgot about Jermaine Defoe. That's a blast from the past right there. But you and I were talking about this a little bit last week as well too. And whether you like it or not, when you look at the depth at that left wing position, and then when you look at the depth at the right wing position, let's just understand that some of those young players, whether it be Matisse Tell, whether it be Wilson Odobert, Brendan Johnson, Mohamed Kudus, whatever the case may be, Yang Min Huck, these young players were brought in from outside the organization, and therefore this team has a fiduciary responsibility for those players first because of the price tag that was attached to it. It sucks. I understand that Spurs fans like academy trained players, man. They essentially, they came through Spurs doors at a young age. They're homegrown. They're one of their own, and there's a certain sentimental attachment attached to that. But unfortunately, that's not the way that the business of football works anymore. It's sad, and it is what it is. But that's why we have loan armies for this exact reason, right? It's an opportunity to showcase your academy products, put them in the shop window, and then move them on for profit. That is the nexus of today's football. But that being said, there are outliers, obviously, Harry Kane, Weeks, and some of these other guys that have come through the academy to make it to the first team, right? These are what we like to call exceptions, not the rules. But that being said, I would probably assume that Mikey Moore might be one of those guys. Obviously, you and I don't have a crystal ball, but that being said, the way that he's talking is that next year he's going to be primed and ready to jump in the first team and play a big role. So who knows how that works out? But it is what it is, right? Because because Spurs went out and spent a whole bunch of money on some of these youth players in those positions. The fiduciary responsibility for this season is making sure that those players develop at a faster rate than a guy like Mikey.
Yeah, 100%. And we discussed it last week. Academies are not designed, especially at the absolute elite level, they're not designed to constantly be bringing your youth players in all of the time and them to go on to become first team regulars. As I said before, that when you're at this sort of level, the amount of people that make it professional is such a small number. Well, then when you talk about the amount of players that make it professional coming from a youth academy to play at the very, very top of the Premier League, is just so difficult. So the whole idea of an academy is to bring through players that Spurs are going to educate and provide them with a footballing career. Now, that footballing career may be in League Two, it may be League One, it may be Championship, it could be Premier League, it could even be at Spurs. But that's not the idea. If you spoke to the academy director, say, he's going to say the goal of what we want to achieve, of course, is we want to bring through Harry Kane every year. Of course we do. But the realistic part of it is we want to produce good footballers that either come up to Spurs and feature for the first team and play, or we sell them on for a profit and then we can then reinvest that money into either better players or we upgrade the academy, say. So that's the whole idea of it. And we've had quite a big jump in terms of how good our academy boys are. So Paratici made some massive changes to the academy setup. But the problem is, exactly like Mikey Moore, is you can't pin all of your hopes on that, because I'm not going to use Mikey Moore because I don't even want to touch fate or attempt fate or anything like that. But you could have a young player coming through that's destined to be absolutely unbelievable, and then he breaks his leg and he never comes back. He never gets to them levels. He could have things going on in his personal life. There's so many different caveats. It isn't just a case of if you're talented enough, you will make it. That's not how it works at this sort of level. So you need a bit of luck. You need a little bit of help along the way. You need all these sort of things to fall in place. So, as I said, Mikey Moore, a lot of people are saying probably one of the best players that's ever come through that youth setup. And absolutely, I agree. I can see that the European game when Maddison compared him to Neymar is proof of that. But there are so many things that could potentially go wrong. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be on him. It doesn't have to be an attitude problem. It could just be extenuating circumstances. So it's so difficult to judge where you're going to be at. So sometimes you do have to go and buy the youth. Look at Chelsea. A lot of their players that come through from their youth team, they're not youth players at all. They've been purchased at 16, 17s, and they've brought them in and then developed them from there. So there's so many different ways of looking at youth football. And also what's very different as well, the way you develop a 15, 16, 17-year-old is completely different to how you develop a 20, 21, 22-year-old. And we need to just be mindful of this.
Absolutely. Before we get into the bulk of this show, I do want to mention to everybody to make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we are on a race to 1,000 subs. So make sure that you not only hit the subscribe button, but also hit the like button. Before we get into it, let's hit the chat real quick, because Nita brings up something right here. She says the first 10 games will be interesting to watch. We aren't going to go unbeaten, but I know that we will see better performances as the season goes on. And I'm glad, Nita, that you brought up the first 10 games, because if you look at that stretch of the schedule, the only team on that 10-game stretch that actually might bring some fear into you is going to be Manchester City. But outside of that, those first 10 games are very winnable for Spurs. to the point where they can actually set the tone for that middle portion of the season, that November to January stretch, where it gets a little dicey. And of course, we remember what happened the last 2 seasons during that stretch as well too. And that was usually the time frame where everything collapsed. So that being said, I 100% agree with you, Nita. And I think I have projected through that first 10 game stretch anywhere between 16 to 20 points, Luke. I actually believe that the Spurs can actually do that.
Yeah, it's a tough one with fixtures because, especially towards the end of the season, so many different teams could be in so many different competitions, or they could be out of competitions, or so. But at the start of the season, everyone kind of starts off at a very similar footing. The difficulty with having what you would say is easy fixtures at the start is if you don't pick up the points, then it's very, very difficult. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, no, definitely. And to be honest, again, if we're targeting the level of players that we're targeting, and we manage to get, I think that if we got 3 more over the line, I think we need 2 more. I think if we got 3 more players over the line that are at a decent level, then we have got a good squad in here. So that would be a team that you would expect to go and win more games. Now, I'm not saying we would win the league or anything like that, but it can sometimes, a bit of momentum can really push you on. And look at, I know Forest, they fell away at the end, but that momentum that was kicking up, I actually said that I didn't think Forest were ever going to get in that Champions League. I thought they would drop away, but there was very few people that said that. Most people were saying they're just going to keep trudging on because momentum is brilliant. And it just so happened that other teams around them hit really good momentum at the end of the season. So yeah, it is a tough one to kind of work out. As I say, there is a caveat to say that if you have your easier games early and you don't get the points on the board, then it could turn out to be a tough season. But that will work either way. It is what it is, sort of thing. So
well, but if you're Nottingham Forest, all you have to do is grease the wheels of UEFA behind the scenes, and then you can screw out Crystal Palace out of their Europa League spot that they actually earned. Just saying. Razzle Dazzle said the Derby up there will certainly get him ready for any NDL in the future. And there is something to that, right? Especially with young players that are learning how to win, right? Learning how to win is one of the hardest things that you can do in football, right? You can be talented, but if you don't understand the subtleties of a match and understanding when to take advantage, when to lay back, it becomes extremely hard to win with young groups. And that being said, he goes up there and he plays in that Derby up there and actually does a very good job and takes advantage of his chances and scores and something like that. Yeah, I think there's something to that.
Yeah, 100%. And as I said, and you're right, not just winning trophies, but expectation to winning games. We've seen so many players that are I'm not going to name names because I don't want to be disrespectful to clubs, but we see so many players that are in the mid-table to lower end of the Premier League at clubs, and they're performing exceptionally well week in, week out. And then they go and sign for, let's say, a top 6 club, and they just struggle because they just can't get the expectation every single game. You can't be an 8 and then go to a 6, a 5, a 4. You need to be a 7, 7, 7, 7. And some players just can't do that. But there'll be that expectancy on more. There'll be that expectancy that, as I said, if he goes to a lower league team, he goes to the Championship, plays for a mediocre team that are mid-table, he can be afforded that time to say you're going to have a good game, then you're going to be bad, and it'll be accepted, and it'll be, well, that's kind of where we are. Whereas he goes to Rangers and he doesn't play well for 5, 6, 7 games, they're going to be going, no, that's out, you're out, that's not good enough. So there is an expectation upon him because of the club are expected to win all of the time. So it can only stand him in good stead if it's successful when he plays a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Just give me 1 second real quick.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. Whoop. Wrong one. There we go. Sorry about that. All right. So Destiny 5 says he's a SAR magic man on the ball. He plays Tottenham Hotspurs and he comes from Senegal. I love the music reference right there. It didn't get past me with that one, but here's the thing, right? Papstar is probably one of the more underrated Spurs on the first team. That being said, it seems like the expectations are elsewhere, but that being said, Papstar is one of my favorite players, and I actually think he's an underrated killer. You mentioned a word earlier, and that is consistency. And I think last season, I think there was a consistency issue, and I have no idea if this was, Ange potentially playing him out of position or playing him in a position where maybe against a certain opponent, it probably wasn't the correct call. But that being said, you look at a guy like Papsar and you look at his trajectory, you look at the high end of talent. There's just no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind that he's actually a very good focal piece for that midfield.
Yeah, I like Sarah. I do like him. I'm very split on him in terms of a lot of what people say about him in terms of sometimes he looks like he can't control the ball, etc., etc. I can see where they're coming from, but I can also, in similar to what you're saying, go, actually, if he just got someone that was a bit of a leader next to him, a bit of a coach on the pitch is what I often refer to.
Right.
I think he could go up levels and do that fairly quickly. He's got a lot of attributes in him that you can't teach in terms of the running power, the ability on the ball, the interceptions. He won so many little tackles, little where he's just got a toe on the ball and nicked the ball away in the derby that we had recently. So I think that under a good manager with, as I said, the right partner alongside him, I think that he could be one that we look back on going, he can make good strides very, very quickly. However, he does need to iron out. He reminds me of someone, he's pretty decent at everything. I mean, some people say that he doesn't have much technique. His technique is actually it's very underrated. Yeah, it's very underrated. His crossing ability is very good. He's the shooting ability from distance is one of the only ones in the squad who actually take shots. So yeah, again, I agree. I can see where people are saying that the level he's at right now is not the requirement we need at Spurs. However, I think that he can excel in that in his ability right now quite rapidly, and we could be looking at it saying like the end of the season going, yeah, this kid can play, sort of thing.
Right, and I think it's also important to remember he's only 23 years old, and it seems like he's been playing for a while, but yeah, he's still a young kid, still hasn't reached his prime yet. And I do agree with you. I mean, the right chemistry and combination of midfields around him, and also remember that he's such an underrated killer. And he always seems to come up large when you absolutely need a goal. I know for a lot of fans, it seems like it comes out of nowhere. But that being said, when Papsar came, I was kind of pleasantly surprised, and I kind of smiled. I'm like, you know what, this is probably going to be a guy that's going to turn some heads at Hotspur way. But Destiny 5 says that Vlahovic is 25. And cheap issue is wages. He's on $300K. I don't think Vlahovic is going to be coming to Spurs at all. I know his number one destination is AC Milan, and I know that Juventus will never, ever, ever sell him to AC Milan. Those two Serie A giants that's just not going to happen. But that being said, if he wants to come to Spurs on on wages that Spurs want to pay him, I doubt it. But that being said, if he wants to do that, I would probably assume that Spurs would take him. But that being said, I do not think that they would ever come close to 300,000 pounds a week. It's just something that Spurs, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it for a guy like I don't even think they would even do it for Xavi Simons. But that being said, if it's like Nico Williams or Yamin Lamal, not that Spurs would ever get those players, but those are the type of players that you're going to grace the player with 300,000 pounds a week.
Yeah, you're talking about a trajectory that's going up, not going down. Obviously,
that's correct.
Vlahovic a couple of years ago, you might have said that he was always on his way up. Fiorentina looked like an absolute superstar in the making, and it seems to have tanked a little bit. But again, like when I spoke about the Paulinho deal, my expectation would always be that there would have to be some sort of obligation. There wouldn't be a place where Bayern would just basically loan him for a year. Now with Vlahovic, maybe Juventus would do that. If Spurs has turned around and saying, look, we're happy to pay X amount per month, and we'll take him on a loan deal, even on 300K, we've still got so much room. Even like Paulinho, for instance, people talking about the wages that he's on, he's essentially a swap for Timo Werner. There was about 25K difference. So we've still got that availability there in the budget. But yeah, Spurs won't be paying 300K. I can't see that in any world. Yeah. However, as I said, as an option, if he was to come in and say as a loan deal, again, with no obligation, because we don't know whether Vlahovic is whether it's just the tactics, whether it's just the managers, whether it's the attitude, whether he's just on a downward spiral. Maybe he just had a few good years. We don't know. So if we could take him on a loan deal for a year, then I definitely think Spurs would be interested. But but it's all about figures. And you can't blame Spurs on this one. You can't say, oh, well, it always is. It's always on figures. You wouldn't want to be blowing a whole load of your wage budget on a striker that isn't going to impact you.
No, of the names that have been floated around, Vlahovic was one of the guys that I actually was not impressed with last season. There was stretches and dips of form. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he scored some pretty good goals last year, but it wasn't anything consistent. And it was one of the reasons why, Juventus kind of dipped at certain points of the Serie A table last season. And what Spurs need now is somebody who's going to come in, challenge for a starting spot, bring competition to Solanke, but also have the ability or have that in his locker of being consistent, being a consistent goal scorer. And I just don't know whether or not his skills translate to the Premier League. I just don't know. So
yeah, it is a bit of a tough one. He does seem almost just the finisher. He seems almost the perfect player that would play in like a 4-4-2 where you've got him just finishing and you've got another man up front to kind of cause havoc. So I'm not sure. I'm not saying he's a terrible footballer or anything like that, but I don't know whether he offers enough away from being just a pure goal scorer who will finish most chances. I think Spurs are not a club where we can let everyone else kind of cover that. I think we need to be very much a team, and especially this season and probably next, before we can start bringing in players that he's not a luxury player. That's probably a bit unfair, but he's not going to offer a lot if he doesn't score goals. And Spurs fans don't like that because Brennan Johnson is very much that sort of player.
Yeah, I was wondering how far into the show we were not going to mention Brendan Johnson, but there it is. It seems to come up. Every show, but I was kind of curious in the back of my mind. I was like, I wonder if Brendan's going to be coming up today. By the way, Destiny 5, this is exactly how you get on my good side. This post, this chat post right here is exactly the type of thing that makes my day. Says he loves Dempsey, never forgot his equalizer against United in the snow last minute. Yeah, that's what happens when good American players come to Spurs.
Yeah,
that's why I've been for like at least 2 years, I've been saying Christian Pulisic needs to be at Tottenham Hotspur. He is a perfect Tottenham Hotspur. But that being said, yes, this is how you get on my good side, my friend. All right, so let's move on because yesterday there was the first edition of the North London Derby. Hong Kong style took place yesterday, and I gotta be honest with you, Luke. I was absolutely impressed, and I don't know about you, but there was a lot of times last season where I was looking at the first team roster and I was literally just besides myself because I was like, how is a team with this much talent performing this terribly? Right? They're far and away better than where they are on the table. And I think a lot of it had to do with leadership. I think coaching may or may not have been a problem. But that being said, there was talent on this first team, without a doubt. And then we get the new head coach, and then we get the new tactics. And by the way, me personally, I think it completely fits with the talent on this team. And I think Thomas Frank is going to know how to utilize players that can play multiple positions. That's beside the point. But yesterday, it was absolutely impressive. From the start of the whistle to the end, I don't think I've seen this type of intensity from Spurs in quite a long time. Everybody seemed to be locked in. Now, I think I may have sent you a WhatsApp yesterday, and I was wondering whether or not this team was going to be able to get consistently forward throughout the course of the game. And sure enough, I think that kind of came to fruition. But that being said, they took advantage of Arsenal's mistakes. They were quick on the counter, and they were trying to get forward at times. But that being said, I think it was like late in the first half, Pap scores the goal to put them ahead. And then for the rest of the way, they just locked down on defense. One of the things that I was quite impressed was the play of Jed Spence on that left-hand side. He was locking down Bukayo Saka for a very good portion of the game. And if you remember, they were literally trying to push the ball down the right-hand side to try to get the ball on Saka's foot, right? Obviously, probably one of their best players with the ball at the feet next to Martin Odegaard. But that being said, Jed Spence was up for the challenge time and time again. And when they were trying to catch Spurs flat-footed and trying to move that ball to the left-hand side, Pedro Porro again, time and time again, to the point where both sides of the field were locked down, leaving Arsenal in a position where they had to try to attack through the middle of the park. And of course, sometimes they made mistakes, bad touches on the ball where obviously the ball would get turned over. Spurs quickly would try to move the ball up the pitch. But that being said, I thought there were just absolutely beautiful individual performances last night. But mainly for me, that this was Spurs' first shot on a big stage, a sellout crowd in Hong Kong. And this was, televised all around the world. This is the dress rehearsal of what should be Tottenham Hotspur moving forward. And I don't know how you feel about this, but they passed with flying colors in my book. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no, 100%. It was a very different performance than the one that a lot of Spurs fans were expecting. We speaking just before we came on about some of the friendlies that took place before. There was a lot of chopping and changing. There was a lot of getting fitness. There was a lot of not necessarily being his first 11 sort of thing. Whereas this one was pretty much the 11. Obviously, there are some absentees in terms of Maddison not be fit, Kulusevski, that sort of stuff. Obviously, Udogie's not there. But it was very much what you could see as being a starting 11. And it was, in many ways, it was very much what I expected, but not necessarily against an opposition of Arsenal. I expect Frank to make us better defensively. I expect him to be able to make us more controlled and more balanced. However, I still don't think we've got enough firepower to cause a lot of teams a lot of problems. So there is a lot of positives, but it kind of highlighted exactly what I was expecting in terms of going into the Premier League season. If we have our best players available and fit and playing regular, I think defensively we'll be good. But I don't think these attacking players are good enough to be able to push us on to where we need to go. And that's one of the reasons why I think we need to bring one, maybe even two more in.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is, when I look at individual performances yesterday, I thought his movement moving forward was actually next level. And again, I thought Mohamed Kudus played well too. It almost seemed like, as they were trying to push forward, it seemed like Spurs were trying to get him on the ball as much as they possibly could. And one of the questions that I had was the chemistry between him and Richarlison. This was, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm trying to remember. I think this was Richarlison's first start of the preseason. I think I want to say that he played against Luton last week. I could be wrong. Or is that Lancashire? He played last week. I know he played. Maybe it was in the. Play. Yeah. But this was his first start, and I was curious to see exactly how he was going to look, and then how those two were going to interchange off that right side. I don't know. It didn't necessarily was the greatest, but that being said, Richarlison had two quality opportunities to score a goal right there in the first half. I think he had a header that didn't go in, and I think there was another play at the back post as well too, where again he had an opportunity. It almost felt like it was a tap in. But that being said, what was your impression of Richarlison last night? Because for me, when I see a striker getting himself in position and that not necessarily might finish, I look, if a player was bad, then the movement itself and putting himself into good positions wouldn't be there. But that wasn't the case. Was it just an issue of rust with Richarlison?
Yeah, the problem with Richarlison is throughout his whole Spurs career, essentially, he's either been injured or not fit because he's been injured. So he's never really had a run. And the run that he did have, he scored a lot of goals in.
Sure.
Again, he's one of them that when I listen to people tell me he's terrible and explain all the reasons why, I'm like, yeah, I see that. However, I also see him being a bit of a pain in the backside. I also see him being a sort of player that you're as a centre-half thinking, oh, not him again. Jesus, he could end up kicking me in the face. He could headbutt me. I have no idea what he's going to do because I don't think Richarlison knows what he's going to do half the time. However, I could also see him being a striker in a Frank system. I think Frank can work with this sort of player. I think he's good in the air. He works hard. He's strong. He can be played. So I think there are some benefits to him. Do I think he's the guy? Absolutely not. Should we be replacing him? Yes. Do we have other priorities in terms of the left wing is where I think we need someone.
Yeah.
As I said, in an ideal world, I think if we could get a versatile forward that can play up front or off the left, but actually to a very high level, then I would be targeting it. But I'm not in. If we can keep him fit, I think he could be a good option for a Frank system. Again, it's just whether he's fit and whether he can play or whether we somehow get him to move on. And I completely forgot to speak about Jed Spence. Jed Spence is a very, very good player, and
right.
I have in a one-on-one battle, I back him against anyone. I've seen him absolutely dominate Salah. I've seen him dominate Saka. So I think he's a brilliant option. And I think the fact that we have Udogie, Porro, and Spence, I think is brilliant because I think they offer very, very different things. I actually think that Porro could end up being one of our players of the season this year because I think the way that Frank will have us playing, I think absolutely suits Porro down to the ground in both aspects. In terms of, we mentioned earlier about the defence and the fullback coming in field, so one of them seems to become almost a third centre back, and then the other one is almost marauding wing back, if you like. Porro's crossing ability and long ball ability, passing is absolutely unbelievable. And I think that if we had sort of a dynamic left winger who is looking to make the typical Son inside of the midfield, inside of the defence run, I think Porro could end up having quite a few assists. And then obviously if he's the one that, if we play Spence, for instance, who's the one that's going to become a little bit more inverted and kind of come into the middle of the pitch, then Porro has free reign to get up that right wing. And his crossing ability is also unbelievable. So I have a feeling that if we get the right left winger, then I know we won't get him. But if we got an Anthony Gordon-like player, then I think Porro's season in terms of assist and attacking output could be very, very good.
You know, the interesting thing, right, is because of the addition of Mohamed Kudus and his, his play on the right side, we haven't seen Pedro Porro kind of be that marauding wingback versus the left side of the pitch, because the left wing itself isn't exactly the strongest on the pitch, which is why you've seen Destiny Udogie play that wingback position and Jed Spence as well too. That being said, I do have to say two things. Number one, I thought Wilson Odebear's performance yesterday was actually pretty good. I love a guy that kind of plays, kind of plays without blinders on. That's not afraid to take guys 1v1, try to get around the corner, go to the touch line, try to put one into the box. I thought his play was pretty good. I thought his touch passing was pretty good. And it seems to me that Wilson Odebear has kind of grown a little bit from last season. I think he understands what the expectations are. And against a team like, Arsenal, where it's absolutely loaded with talent on the defensive side, I didn't think that he was out of place yesterday. As a matter of fact, I thought he played. Again, I thought he was one of our best forwards on the pitch yesterday for long stretches of time. So there's that, and I'm kind of curious. I do agree with you, and I actually think that Son's replacement should get through the door within this month of August. And if that's a big name, it's a big name. Whatever the case may be, that absolutely should be the priority. Maybe you feel like strikers probably should come first, but that being said, I actually think the left wing should probably be the next one off the list. As far as this, because I do think Wilson Odebear has a spot on this team. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you feel this way, but I think Odebear is better on the left side than a guy like Matisse Tell at this point. What do you think?
I think it very much depends on how they're going to play. I think that Odebear has the ability to play on either side. Personally, I think that he's got.
Do you think he's better? Do you think he's better on the left or the right?
I think he's probably better on the left. However, and this is the problem we were saying about it, we've just got too many players that their base level at this moment in time is not quite there. However, could explode and could go up levels very, very quickly. And I would put Sarr in that. I would put Tell in there, and I'd also put Odebear. I think Odebear, a lot of what he does well is good. But I think his decision making needs to change, and I think that needs to be better. And if that is better, I think that will develop quite quickly. But again, I think that there is a spot for Tell and Odebear in this squad. I don't think Tell is a striker. I think he struggles in that environment. Maybe that's just a Premier League thing. Maybe it's a physicality thing. However, I do think that you're almost going to be played as a left winger. It's almost like a left forward, really, kind of like coming inside. And I think that he could end up doing some damage. I've seen a lot of people say again that he doesn't have a lot of characteristics that are good, but I think his crossing ability is good. I love the attitude. I think he's always got the drive, the determination. He's a player that's obviously throughout his youth been hyped up as a bit of a superstar. However, the way he comes across is that he's very much we need to work hard. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
You can see it. He immediately adapted to the fans. And again, it'd be very easy for a player coming over from Bayern Munich to kind of just be like, I should be the main man here. I don't really need to incorporate myself with X, Y, Z. I can just do what I like. And he didn't be like that. So, yeah, I do think that, again, if you get in a top level left winger, these sorts of players can learn from. And it could end up just absolutely helping them. And I think that's been one of our problems, is that the famous saying, you never win anything with kids, that wasn't saying that kids are never good enough. That was saying that you need to have experience in and around it. And when you're so focused on bringing on these young players, looking around that dressing room, who if you're a young player, you're an 18-year-old that's just signed for Tottenham, who do you sit there going, that's the player I want to learn from? Son, you could argue, however, he's on the decline.
Well, so, if you're Yang Min Huck, it's obviously Sonny, right? So, but that being said, your point's valid.
But if it was 2-3 years ago, then you'd be going, Son, 100%. I need to learn from this guy. He's the top level. So I think there is a little bit of that. But yeah, I think Oliver and Tell. I don't think that all of these players should have been signed. I don't think we should have. If you've got Odebear, I don't think you need to go and get Tell. If you've got Tell, you don't need Odebear. And there's a few others that we can kind of go into. But I think that they're here. I think that they, with Frank, with the structure of the team being better, with him probably having a bit of more understanding tactically where players may or may not be, I think all of them can have an impact. But I don't see any of them being the absolute number one at the start of the season. Maybe towards the end they can develop and they can be that guy, but I feel like the left wing is an issue at this moment in time.
I would agree with you. I do want to talk a little bit about Jed Spence for a second here, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think the reason why we haven't gotten in a backup right wing back or even a backup left back, and I know that there's a lot of fans that still think that the position behind Destiny Udogie needs to be filled ASAP. But I think the reason why they haven't done that yet is because of Jed Spence's ability to play both sides. Natural right back, but he's also just a tremendous left back. And I think his role is going to be that. There's going to be multiple opportunities for him to play both sides of the ball, giving guys rest when they absolutely need it in a rotation. And when you look at this season specifically in a vacuum, understanding that it's a World Cup year, and understanding that Jed Spence is still on the peripheral of Thomas Tuchel's England, right? This is an opportunity for him to kind of be, I guess you can say maybe the first guy off the bench, defensively at least. But that being said, when you think of the rotation for the Champions League and you think the rotation for some of these cup matches, and even in the Premier League itself, Jed Spence is going to be in a position where he's going to, get valuable minutes. And I don't necessarily think that left back, that backup left back position needs to necessarily be addressed, because you have that one guy that plays both positions and plays at an incredibly high level. And I think, when you look at it and when you look at the rotation of how he's going to be used, he's easily, I would probably assume he's going to break 2,000 minutes on the season. I just think there's an opportunity for him to not only, to not only play the right side, but also the left side. And if they get creative, especially with some of the rotation with the Champions League and the Premier League, Jed Spence is probably going to be one of the more pivotal players this season. And I think that he's up for the challenge of being that guy who's going to be both the backup right back and the backup left back.
I completely agree. I think he's go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
No. He's very, very good. I would argue as well and say that, and I think this is part of down to the opposition that you play. I would say he's better on the left-hand side, specifically because when you look at the way teams play, Brentford and Mbeumo, Saka, obviously at Arsenal, they all of them are pretty much a right winger that comes inside on their stronger foot, and that means they're actually coming in against Jed on his stronger foot as well. So actually, it can play into his help him playing on that side. So I do completely agree. I think he's brilliant on both sides. My fear would be, I think Van der Ven could also cover that position, specifically the one where you become more of a centre back. Yeah. My fear would be that we don't have enough cover at left centre back as well, though. So if we had the options at right centre back, so for instance, if you and some of our players can play on the left hand side, however, for me, you need a left-footed player there, or you need a player that's literally played the left-hand side of a back four, left centre-back of a back four for years upon years, not someone who can just play there. So Romero, Takai, Vuskovic, Gregerson, Danso, they're all more comfortable on the right-hand side. So if we had like 2 or 3 players that could play left centre-back and then Van der Ven went there, I'd completely agree with you. I'm just fearful that if Van der Ven is one of the options as well, then our centre-backs all of a sudden become a little bit split and everything else. So that's why I don't have a preference on, do we get a left back, do we get a left centre-back? We need one of them.
I would prefer left centre back,
Ideally, that player can play both. But yeah, I agree. When you actually look at it, you've probably got, let's just say for argument's sake, Udogie is your number 1. Spence will be your number 2. Van der Ven will probably be your number 3. And then Ben Davies will probably be number 4. So you have got it there, but then that means pulling players out of other positions like Jed Spence, Van der Ven. So I still think we need some sort of cover there. But yeah, I do agree. I think it will be very much like the 3 fullbacks we have will be almost the first. They'll be in the first team constantly. It will be them 3 that will constantly be playing there, and it'll only be on the worst sort of occasions where there's injuries, suspensions, that sort of stuff, where it will be pulled away from them. I think Archie Gray will also play minutes at right back against the lesser teams as well, to be honest with you.
And that's the reason why I think that the reason why they haven't moved it is because they do actually have cover on that right side. If they absolutely needed, Archie Gray could play that position without missing a beat. Quickly before I move on to the next point, I will say something about Luka Vuskovic. As much as I love the young kid, I think he's absolutely brilliant, but let's just pump the brakes real quick, because yes, he's looked fantastic in the preseason, but again, it's against League One opposition, right? I think we have to understand exactly the reason why he looked good. And that being said, I look at this season and I'm like, yes, he's played on the left side. I think he was playing primarily with Danso in that center back pairing. But that being said, what does this mean, and what does this translate coming into the Premier League? Because it's a whole different kettle of fish coming from the preseason into the regular season, and you're going up against a murderer's row and a who's who of some of the best players in the world.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it comes down to the partner that you have. And this is what I keep going back to about the whole young players, is that you can't just keep going and signing young players. You need leaders and people that they need to learn from. And I don't feel like we have enough of them. Your Bergwald in that central midfield of Basuma and Bentancur, who's sitting there going to him, no, you need to be doing this, or you need to pull back, or you need to be more defensive, or you need to pass the ball quicker. None of them seem that sort of player. And then at centre half, for instance, Vuskovic, I would probably argue that him and Ben Davies is probably the perfect partnership, in terms of Ben Davies is a coach on the pitch, and he will be telling Vuskovic from an experience point of view exactly what is required. So yeah, we do need to be very careful with these young players. However, again, if he's managed correctly, he could end up being an absolute top level player for Tottenham.
I agree. I very much agree with you. By the way, I like his positioning. I like his footwork. When I watch him on tape, the first thing I'm looking at is his spatial awareness, right? So I'm looking at his feet, and I'm looking at the way his body's pointed. Even at a young age, it seems like he has a firm grasp of how to play the position, right? You would probably say, well, Steve, granted, obviously he's a pro. But that being said, it's interesting when you see players in their developmental curve. There are certain things that, they eventually grasp it. But it's like when it comes to the fundamentals of playing that position, that dude is already light years ahead of where I thought he was going to be. I mean, I saw him on film in his last stop, and I was impressed. But looking at the tape again and just watching his feet, that dude is amazing.
Yeah. 100%. And listen, we live in a very data-led, statistic-led society now at football. but I can watch a game and tell you that he's a good player. Like I don't need all this, that, and the other. I don't need, and also saying that as well, you can flip it the other way, and that if he's a centre, because he's been like well renowned because of the goal scoring and the assisting and everything else. I don't really care about that. That's an added bonus. I don't care if my centre half doesn't score a goal all season if he keeps out the opposition and stop them scoring. Do you understand what I'm saying? So for me, you can watch him and you can see that he's a player. He knows what he's doing. He's got he looks very experienced. He looks like an 18-year-old that's played. I'm going to guess he's closing in on 100 senior games because of the 2 loan spells, and he obviously also featured for his, so he's probably on the 60-70 mark, I would guess. So he looks like a player that's played a decent experience. It then comes down to pressure. It then comes down to, is he able to make these sort of movements? Because you're completely correct in terms of, I've looked at him. He looks like he's aware of what's going on. He looks confident in his abilities. He looks like he's able to take the ball under a bit of pressure and carry on doing exactly what he would do. It's when we're now playing in the Premier League and he's not being pressured by a League One side. He's being pressured by a Alexander Isak. He's being pressured by a Mo Salah. Right. Is he able to transfer that over? And obviously, Spurs fans, we just hope that answer to that is yes. But yeah, again, I think he will be, if managed correctly. I think he's going to be a top player.
Right, and it's the same way that I look at a guy like Jed Spence as well too. Right, natural right footer, but when he's playing on the left side, I'm looking at his feet and I'm looking at his lateral movement. Right, I'm looking what he does with his left foot. Specifically first moving side to side. And there's a reason why Bukayo Saka couldn't get around, right? It's just that spatial awareness and understanding exactly where you're supposed to be as far as your distance between 2 players, exactly what that first step is going to look like, and your ability to close down space. And it's the same thing with Vuskovic, right? It's interesting. It's interesting that there are some players that don't necessarily have that. They may be fantastic in other areas, right? But it just seems like overall well-rounded players, you can look at it and be like, that dude gets it. That dude gets it. Yeah, for sure. All right. So we're closing. I think we just got a few more minutes left, and I do want to talk about Newcastle real quick. And this is going to be a very interesting one, right? We're going to see this. This is like the first opportunity for this team on 3 days' notice. And last season, of course, it didn't necessarily work. Didn't work out well for Spurs, especially after losses. It just seemed there was a tremendous amount of carryover, and especially during the injury crisis, there just was not any type of rotation. But whatever, man. This is now a new opportunity to exactly see how they respond after a victory like Arsenal. Now you get Newcastle, and granted, I don't know how you feel about Newcastle, but again, it's a preseason. I don't necessarily care about the opposition, but what I care about is whether or not this team is able to carry over momentum, right? There's certain things that are very much you very much carry over, right? And it's that attention to detail. It's understanding exactly what made you successful in the first place, right? Like for example, one of the things I loved about that match for Arsenal was our ability in the press. It wasn't just one guy moving forward and trying to challenge the center back with the ball. Every single time the ball moved, there was somebody closing space. We actually made Arsenal, earn their way down the pitch, and it wasn't by accident, right? It just seems like these players are locked in. So what I want to see are those attributes again that are going to be able to carry over on short notice. But I also want to see how these players respond with short notice as well too, right? Because I would probably assume we're going to see a bulk of them. I probably would assume that James Maddison is probably going to get a start in this one as well too. We saw him come off the bench against Arsenal just to get some minutes. Now I think you're probably going to see Maddison potentially get a start. So that being said, man, for me, this game is very interesting, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Newcastle.
Yeah, again, I think you're right. It's going to be interesting to see, and obviously it is a quick turnaround, but we're going to have to get used to that. That's going to happen plenty of times this season. Correct. So we are going to have to go through this sort of situation. I'm a big fan. I'm not a massive fan of playing Arsenal in a preseason friendly because I don't think it's ever a friendly. However, I'm a big fan of playing top opposition because that's what we need to do. This is the level we need to be competing at. We need to know whether we can or we can't. So 100%, I think Newcastle are, with the right additions, they are a top team. Their midfield, that Bruno and Tonali as a midfield is just unbelievable. I mentioned Gordon earlier. What a top player he will be in Spurs' team. So yeah, they're great. They're great tests. They're great tests. As you said, you want to see whether or not that was a one-off, whether, as we've said again, consistency. Are we able to consistently compete? One thing that I think what happened last year a lot, and I was quite a big fan of Ange. I felt that he would. I had a feeling he would always get us over the line for some reason or another. And I like what he done. Whether he was the long-term manager is a completely different conversation. But on some of the games that we played last year, it did feel like no one really bothered about some of the defeats. No one really cared that much. And if you're going to listen, we're going to lose games. That's just going to happen. But we lose them in the right way in terms of you don't give up, you work hard, you try the most. And I think Frank will bring that. His teams bring that. Kudos, Kudus. I keep being told off for the way I pronounce his name. He works so hard, so hard. And obviously, I think that that will be brought out in the team. So it will be an interesting one because the thing is with pre-season, you never know what sort of games, what sort of teams clubs are putting out. You had a feeling that Arsenal were going to go fairly strong, and you had a feeling Spurs were going to go fairly strong because neither wanted to roll over. But yeah, it'll be a real interesting one. I think Newcastle are a real good test, and that's the sort of level we should be competing at. Obviously, them losing Isak could be massive. But if we make the right signings, Aston Villa, Newcastle, they're the sort of teams that we would want to be competing for and finish above in this season. So I think it will be a good test.
But I also think that because Thomas Frank has already circled the UEFA Super Cup on his calendar, it's something that he's been shooting for, and you're not going to do that playing league. You're not going to get yourself ready for a team like PSG by playing League One side. So that is the nexus of exactly what you just said. It's the ability to play win or lose against top opposition, getting yourself in a position to get ready for a opportunity to win again another trophy. Here's the thing. I don't care what people say. The Super Cup is something that is absolutely vastly important, but also it sets a tone and it also sets the momentum for the season going into that first week against Burnley. If they're able to lift it, that's for me. I can't think of a better way to start the season if you're Spurs. Go ahead.
100,000,000%, and it's one of them like the Charity Shield, for instance, where if you lose it, you kind of brush it off and go, it didn't mean that much. However, if you win it, it's a game changer, and especially for a club like Spurs, if we go into it, and I know they're so close together, and one is an immediate result of the other, but you win 2 trophies in the space of a couple of months. Winning just breeds confidence. It brings so many things. You look at Ange's demeanor throughout that whole thing, him saying it so early on in the season, I always win things. He's got the confidence because he knows he's got over the line at whatever level you want to say it. Winning breeds winning. Winning trophies brings a different feeling. You feel invincible. And if we can pick up another trophy, then you go into the season absolutely flying. So 100%, it is one of them, as I said, that you kind of, if you don't win it, you kind of brush it off and you go, look, PSG are unbelievable. They won the Champions League last year. It's not the be all and end all of our season. We can still be successful. But if you win it, then it's absolutely a springboard, as I said, for a club like Spurs. And what a day that would be if Spurs managed to get over the line.
All right, I got 2 quick questions, and we're going to close this thing out. The first one is, what is your expectations for James Maddison this season?
It'd be real interesting whether or not we do go down the route of trying to bring in a 10. I have a feeling Morgan Gibbs-White was probably going to play as more an advanced 8, so probably be Palhinha, for instance, partner in that middle. However, I think Maddison, if we have the right structure in place, and again, part of this will also be part of who we bring in. But yes, being available more. And again, he's very similar to Richarlison in the sense of how often is he playing where he's not 100% fit because he's either injured or on the way back from injury. However, he could be a bit of a diamond in the rough, because if you are playing games where you've got, I think the problem we've had this year is that if you kind of man mark Sonny a bit and you kind of man mark Brennan and don't stop him scoring at the back post, you kind of alleviate a lot of the issues. Whereas where you've got Kudus on one side, if you bring in a left winger, it could end up freeing Maddison to have a little bit more impact. So I am expecting some good things from him. What Thomas Frank managed to do with Damsgaard was unbelievable. When Damsgaard first come into the league, people were writing him off very, very quickly. And he was a bit of a star last year. So if he's got that sort of level in him, I think Maddison's quality-wise is definitely up there. So I am expecting some big things. But again, it's that fitness issue. He needs to not just be available in terms of not being injured, but he needs to be 100% and fit and available because he hasn't coming off of a long stretch of injuries.
I think this is a make or break year for Matters.
Yes, 100%.
Because I've been wondering whether or not he's trustworthy as a player, because last season it seemed like he picked and chose when he wanted to show up. Now, I don't know if that was a fitness issue. I don't know if he had beef with Ange Postecoglou, but it was very telling that when we were still in the thick of games in the 70th minute, he was taken off the pitch quite a bit. In crunch time, the last 20 minutes of the game where you're fishing for a goal, whether it's an equalizer or taking the lead, he was taken off the pitch. I would probably assume for very good reasons, right? And again, just like Jed Spence, this is a World Cup year, and his desire is to be a part of that World Cup squad. So he's got every single incentive to be that guy, to be that quintessential number 10. But again, for me, this is all about whether or not going forward he is a trustworthy player. And I know that there's a lot of people that absolutely love Matters. But like me, it's like I see the talent, but I also remember there was a time where Leicester City fans were telling us he's talented, but he also has a tendency to be lazy. He picked me that was the not coming into Spurs, and so far I think that's kind of rang true. But I do agree with you. I think it's going to be an interesting. I think I also said this as well too. I think the two players most that are going to benefit from Thomas Frank are going to be Dominic Solanke and James Maddison. But that being said, it's all on the shoulders of Maddison at this point. And this is, for me, this is either sink or swim. It is such a make or break year for him.
Yeah, again, I completely agree. I think if he has a bad season this year, and again, it's a tough one. Numbers-wise, they weren't that bad. But if he doesn't live up to the hype this year, then yes, I can very much see a player the player moving on at the end of the season 100%, because I think that you can't have being at Spurs, you can't have players that are not 100% and not on it every game and not consistent, and he's fallen into that. However, again, if he's on his day, he's 100% one of Spurs' best players. So we need to try and make sure we put him in a system that allows him to flourish. I think at certain times last year, the tactics meant he was doing a bit more than he needed to, or a bit more than he should do.
Right.
But then also I would caveat that by going, I don't think the forward line is good enough. So is it because he has to be the focal point for absolutely everything? As I said, if you at the moment, if you're going into a Premier League season, you're going, well, Kudus is dangerous. People will want to make sure they mark him and they deal with him efficiently. And they'll also do the same thing with Maddison. Whereas last year, it felt like if you stopped Maddison, everything else, no one else was really gonna be able to make something happen. Obviously, Kulusevski was a player that will be involved in that as well, but obviously towards the end he was injured a lot. So I think that it's the platform now. He's going to have a platform where defensively we're going to be solid enough. There'll be enough people around him that will work hard, and it will be for him to deliver. We'll see at the end of the season whether or not he's had a good season. I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful as well too. Yeah, there was so many times last season where he had to drop deep to make a touch because there was just nobody that was, in a position to handle that ball. Unfortunately, by dropping deep, he was not able to get back into possession and be effective when they needed him in the box. So I really hope that type of work rate is not going to be required this season for Maddison. All right, I think that's going to do it for us, Luke. I do want to thank you for coming on today. It's always a pleasure talking to you, man. I enjoy Spotlight on Spurs, and I definitely enjoy the content you put out, but also you're a great guest as well, too. What's going on with Spotlight on Spurs moving forward?
Cheers, thank you very much. Yeah, I've set up my own do a little mini series where I'm basically reaching out. There's a hell of a lot of YouTubers in the space, and I'm trying to reach out to each one of them, and trying to do just a little 10 questions, half an hour episodes where it's just gauging. Yeah, listen, there is so many.
I'm messing with you, man. I'm messing with you.
You'll be invited. Don't worry. It's just finding a time. I work full time. I've got 2 little ones and everything else. So, and one of the reasons why you kindly changed the day was because weekends are very, very difficult for me. So, so I'm doing that, releasing like 3 episodes a week, and it's all around what people's feelings are around Spurs. It changes every episode because, for instance, when I first started, Morgan Gibbs-White had just been Here We Go, and we was kind of pushing on with him and Kudus within back-to-back days, and then go further on, and there's still and ahhing, is it going to happen? And then the last few have been he's definitely out. The most recent one, Palhinha, was a Here We Go, and he was in. So it's constantly changing, but it's kind of just getting a gauge of where people think we're at, and then we can maybe do a little preview towards like January time and see where people were correct. We're asking people to do some hot takes and what their predictions are going to be. So we'll see if anyone's spot on with that. Solanke to score 20 league goals was one of the shouts. So it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I'm a relatively new channel. I've only been going for a few months. So we're only live streaming on once a week, every Thursday at this moment in time, 9:30 UK time, 9:30 PM UK time on Thursdays, bringing in all different sorts of guests. I'm someone who wants to hear different opinions and hear the other side, if you like, to make me become more educated in my own conversations and what my thoughts and feelings are. So just a chat, literally as if you was down a pub with a few mates having a chat about football. That is all it is.
And according to Razzle Dazzle, Lucas here, there, and everywhere. That he certainly is. Quick programming note, just to let everybody know what's coming up this weekend on Stateside Footy. The Leagues Cup is back, the 2025 version of the Leagues Cup. The competition between Major League Soccer and Liga MX is underway. And of course, we have the Leagues Cup live stream going down on Saturday between Orlando City FC and Atlas. And then on Sunday, of course, 7 o'clock in the morning here on the East Coast of the United States, we have the Spurs watch along. And of course, this is Stateside Footy's first live stream when it comes to Tottenham Hotspur. And so that's going to get kicked off at 6:30 a.m. And I believe that is 12:30 UK time as we do a quick little pre-match. And then, of course, we get into the game itself. So plenty of content coming up this weekend on Stateside Footy. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons because, again, we're in a race for 1,000 subs. So the quicker we do that, the quicker we can do really cool shit with this channel. All right. So, Luke, I want to thank you, man. And I hope that you're able to hang out with the family tonight. But more importantly, I hope that you have yourself a fantastic weekend. And that, come Sunday when we play Newcastle, it's a breeze. It's a walk in the park. So I hope you have a good weekend, my friend.
Thank you very much. And a pleasure coming on. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys take care. Enjoy your weekend. I will see you tomorrow night for the Leagues Cup live stream. And then, of course, for the Tottenham Hotspur live stream on Sunday morning. So until then, you guys have a great afternoon. Enjoy yourselves. Take care.